Now, back in April, more than 1 million people globally participated in the March for Science. The mission statement for the March of Science stated, and I picked out a couple blurbs from it, "We unite as a diverse, nonpartisan group to call for science that upholds the common good and for political leaders and policymakers to enact evidence-based policies in the public interest." And it goes on, "People who value science have remained silent for far too long in the face of policies that ignore scientific evidence and endanger both human life and the future of our world." Well, one field of science and medicine that wasn't encouraged at the march was human embryology. In today's episode, I'm going to look at the science of life, embryology, and look at some of the methods of abortion. Joining me to discuss these important topics is the ProLifeDoc, William Lile, D.O. Dr. Lile is a board-certified physician in obstetrics and gynecology. Dr. Lile, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and start out our discussion with the most fundamental question. Based on biology and the field of human embryology, when does life begin? Is it at fertilization? Is it at birth, as some people say? Or is it somewhere in between?
Well, scientifically, the biggest event and the clearest event where you can say from this gamete, this egg and this sperm, when does it become a new person? It's at conception. From that moment of conception, when that one cell from the dad and the one cell from the mom get together, as soon as the chromosomes from the mom and the chromosomes from the dad get together, they are unique from the mom, they are unique from the dad, they can have a different blood type from either the mother or the father. It's a new person. In fact, there's been a lot of advertising where you'll see 23andMe or Ancestry.com, where you can do a swab of your cheek, send off those cells, and they can tell you your ethnicity, where your family came from, even medical traits about yourself and characteristics. All of that genetic material is laid down at the moment of conception, and that is who you are for the rest of your life. That is the big event that happens, during the conception, during the pregnancy. It's at that moment of conception, this is a new person.
Okay, so when we hear people say that the zygote or the fertilized egg or the earliest stages of the embryo is just a clump of cells, where are they wrong?
They're wrong because that clump of cells is going to develop into a totally unique new person. There's no other cells that are in the body that have that potential to become this new person. So when you go back, it's like, well, is it 28 days? Is it at 26 days? It's like, well, maybe not, maybe not. And when you have to lay the line down, you say, well, the biggest event and the most distinct and unique event is at that moment of conception. And that's where you have to draw your line and say, this game starts right here.
Right. And you cannot compare this to, say, a regular body cell or somatic cell.
Correct. Those cells do not have that ability to become a new person. Just as, with anything else, they are part of the adult. They're part of that one unique person. Now, people say, well, what about identical twins? Even identical twins, we can look, if we're trying to, determine paternity, even identical twins have subtle differences between twin A and twin B. They're still unique. They might have a lot of characteristics where they look alike, but there are still subtle differences between them.
Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about the development of the unborn. Can you talk about some of the significant organ development milestones, when they're formed, starting with maybe the heart?
Sure. We can even see the heart actually beating on an ultrasound as early as about 20 days gestation. When that is 20 days from actual conception, not from the first day of the last menstrual period. We can see that on the ultrasound. We can see that little flicker of life. The baby is only maybe 7 millimeters long, a quarter-inch long, but we can already see that little flicker of life. But we can also determine when a pregnancy is inside the uterus at a very early age. The first thing that forms is what's called the gestational sac, and we'll actually see this little bubble inside the uterus. The next thing we see is a tiny little yolk sac. It's still too early, at that 2-week point to really see what's going to develop as the baby itself. But we can see this tiny little kind of a cyst within a cyst of this yolk sac. And the very next thing that we know, hey, we have a viable pregnancy, we can actually visibly see what has been developing from these two cells that got together. And that's going to be about 20, 21 days where we can see that first flicker of the heartbeat there on the inside.
Yeah. Now, based on the latest technology that's available, and this is a very interesting topic, when does the fetus first feel pain?
You know, it is tough to tell. I mean, there's been so much research, but it's also challenging to see when the baby feels pain. And one of the things is, well, you know, we can do what we want to the baby because the baby might not be able to react to pain at this point. Well, just because somebody can feel pain or not feel pain and then has something like an abortion performed on them doesn't mean that it was right or wrong. Example, this morning I operated on 2 different patients. They were under general anesthesia and they felt no pain whatsoever while they were under general anesthesia. If I were to commit an error and mom were to pass away because of an error in my surgical skills, I would never be able to go out to the family and say, you know what, I was operating on mom, I hit the wrong blood vessel, your mom passed away unfortunately, but I can reassure you she felt no pain. So the concept of finding out when pain occurs as far as when does somebody, have a personhood as far as when an abortion can or cannot be done, it's really, difficult, to even use that kind of an argument, because just because somebody does not feel pain does not mean that something wrong has not been performed. When we look and we can see the babies as far as their heart rate, if we're doing an amniocentesis in that second trimester, say we're doing an amniocentesis at 14, 15 weeks, and we put a needle in to test some of the fluid around the baby, and inadvertently the baby moves around and hits the end of the tip of the needle, their immediate reaction is, I don't know what that was, but I'm going to move from this side of the womb to that side of the womb. The heart rate immediately goes up, so we know that they are not only feeling pain, but they are reacting and responding to the pain early in that second trimester.
Okay, let's talk about the viability of the fetus. And many medical communities consider the viability of the fetus sort of a gray area. And the number that's frequently tossed out there is 24 weeks. But technology has really advanced over time. Where do you put the viability of the fetus at?
Well, and viability would mean when can the baby first start to survive on the outside. The mom is the life support system for the baby. Just like when I have my scuba gear on, I'm going, scuba diving out in the Gulf. My scuba gear is the life support system. The mom is the life support system. The viability has really been changing over the decades. It used to be almost unheard of to hear of a 26-week baby being able to be delivered and then surviving on the outside. At our hospital here in Pensacola, we have had babies who have not just survived, but have survived and done well intact at 24 and sometimes even as early as 23 weeks. Once we get down to 22 weeks, at this point, we just don't have the technology to be able to support the baby so that the baby would be able to survive on the outside.
Okay. Let's talk about another technology, the ultrasound, which is really advanced over time. It's gotten so detailed that abortionists don't like to share this information with the mother because they may reconsider the abortion. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Ultrasound has, dramatically changed the way that we view the preborn while they're still in the womb. We can not only see the heartbeat flickering at 20-some days, but we can use Doppler and we can actually hear that thump, 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 thump of the baby's heartbeat on the inside. When we're doing an anatomy ultrasound, we can scan the anatomy, we can see facial expression. We can not only see this in 2 dimensions, we can see it in 3 dimensions where you can actually, just like if you were looking on the face on the outside. I've got some great pictures of portraits of babies that were already born, and then you can go back and you can look at the three-dimensional ultrasound of the baby while it was in the womb. And it's amazing how not only can you identify that this is the same person, this is the same baby, but they'll even have the same facial expressions from inside and outside. You can even, here in Pensacola, actually over in Milton, in one of the strip malls is a company called Peekaboo. Peekaboo is kind of like the Olin Mills of ultrasound, where you can go in, you can spend $90, and you can walk out with portraits of your baby, three-dimensional images, and sometimes even videos in 3 dimensions, which is known as 4-dimensional video of your baby moving around on the inside. You can start the portrait album for the baby while the baby is still inside the womb. You can see, oh, it's got mom's nose, it's got dad's ear. You can see this kind of detail. There was a really interesting study that actually just came out today from the University of Kansas, published in the Daily Mail, where it showed that babies within the womb, when they were exposed to English versus when they were exposed to Japanese, the babies within the womb could differentiate between the language that they were used to hearing and the language that they were not used to hearing from the same person and at the same volume. So babies are able to comprehend something that has been heard, as English for the months that they've been gestating, yet you would see a very distinct heart rate difference on the baby inside the womb when they would hear a foreign language. Just as if we were in the airport and there's an announcement in English, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. And then when you're waiting for your flight and there's an announcement in Japanese, it's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to get on the plane or not. It's foreign. It's something that new. And the babies were able to recognize the difference between English being spoken and Japanese being spoken while they were still in the womb.
Oh, that's fascinating. Now, something that's not so much of a hot topic anymore, but I still wanted to get your thoughts on it, is on the use of embryonic versus non-embryonic stem cells. What does the science say about this?
Well, the science says that are there going to be advancements in science and healing with stem cell technology? Yes, there definitely are going to be. But are stem cells that have been harvested from babies or aborted babies going to be our best source of stem cells? What's key about a stem cell is a very early cell, and it's what's called totipotential, where it has all that genetic material and it can become anything. When our bodies first start to develop and you have 1 cell, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, they had that ability through cell differentiation to become any organ or any organ system. How this works, we really don't understand. It is just a miracle of creation that 2 cells will divide very early in the pregnancy, and the 1 cell will just independently make up its mind that, you know what, from now on, I'm going to start the entire skeletal system. The other cell says, well, you know what, you do the skeletal system, I'm going to start the entire circulatory system. And from that very basis, they all have the same genetic blueprints, but they know what their job is to do as far as construction. Just like if a bunch of contractors show up to build a building, some of them say, okay, we're going to do all the plumbing, we're going to do all the electrical work, we're going to do all the sheetrock. The body knows that. And when it comes to that cell differentiation, we just don't know how it happens. We just know that it does, and it's just purely a miracle.
All right, let's switch gears to the abortion itself. There's quite a number of different methods available. And can you, because I want the audience to really understand how really brutal some of these procedures are. But can we start out with like the abortion pills and then work your way up to the other types of procedures?
Sure. First, to view the procedures in a acceptable, non-bloody, baby part way, we've uploaded videos up on YouTube to give you an idea of what the interest is on the general public on a venue such as YouTube. We took the abortion equipment that I am in possession of when we took over the practice when I finished my residency. In 1999, the practice that I took over was the largest provider of abortion services in our area. We not only stopped the abortions on day one, we stopped all referrals, and we told the staff if they did refer, they would be terminated at that time. But then we also had all the abortion instruments, and we had the abortion machine. So it's that equipment that I take around the country to show how the brutality of an abortion actually happens in the first, second, and third trimester. when it comes to the different medical ways of inducing an abortion, really comes in two steps. Step number one is to stop the growth of the pregnancy, and step number two is then to cause contractions to expel the baby. So whether it's with the abortion pill or with the abortion shot, the mechanism is still the same. They can be used up to 7 weeks gestation. There could be a heartbeat that's there. There's a hormone called progesterone that is naturally released by the body. Progesterone, as in pro-gestation. It keeps the gestation going. Well, these medications will actually go in and they will block that progesterone. And when the body loses that signal to keep the pregnancy going, well, then it stops the growth of the pregnancy. Then a medication called Cytotec is used, which is what's known as a prostaglandin, and it'll actually cause the muscles of the wall of the uterus to contract. And so once the pregnancy has been stopped growing, the muscle contraction will then cause that pregnancy to get expelled out. But then there are also the surgical abortions, which is really currently the most common abortion that's performed here in the United States. And with a surgical abortion, first, second, and third trimester, the cervix, which is the opening to the womb, where when the doctor says, hey, you're 10 centimeters dilated, you can start pushing. Well, the job of the cervix is to stay closed to keep the pregnancy in there until it is time to push. But with a surgical abortion, whether it's the first, second, or third trimester, using progressively larger instruments, the cervix is dilated, so that instruments can then be placed up into the womb. Placed up into the womb where a baby has a heartbeat, a baby's kicking around, a baby is swimming, a baby is moving around, and then in the early part of the pregnancy, in the first trimester, a tube called a suction curette is then introduced up into the womb, and then the baby, the fluid, the placenta, are then sucked through that tube. In the second and third trimester, instruments are used to remove the baby piece by piece in the second trimester, and intact bottom first or feet first in the third trimester. So if you log on to YouTube and you just look at abortion demonstration, look for the ones that are labeled under Dr. Lile. Usually my videos, when you put that question in on YouTube, I'll have 5 or 6 of the top 10 videos that are listed under abortion demonstration. It's the instruments of abortion, it's the abortion machine that's being used, but there's no baby parts, there's no blood. You can just sit and you can watch it and you can say, my goodness, you can put the two together. You've seen the life of the baby on the inside, you've seen ultrasounds, but now you can imagine in your mind what kind of a brutal attack is going on when you see the demonstrations in the first, second, and third trimester.
Okay. All right, Dr. Lile, any final thoughts, anything that I didn't bring up that you want to bring up?
I think you've done a wonderful job, on all of the facts. And the thing is this winnable? Absolutely. And if somebody were to look at the sky tonight, you'll look up at the stars and you'll realize that just on the stars that we can see in the galaxies that are out there, just in our galaxy, we probably have 200 million stars. And now with the Hubble telescope, we're looking out and we're saying there probably is 100 billion galaxies that are out there, all with probably at least as many as stars as in our galaxy. Then you think about the God that hears our prayers, who answers our prayers, who just, when he said, and God created the heavens and the earth, he created all that just with that thought. And that's the same God that we pray to. That's the same God that pays attention to our individual needs. And so if the God who created that universe that is beyond our understanding as far as its expanse hears our prayers, and we sit and say, can we win this debate? Can we win this battle? Absolutely. This is not a battle against flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. And you need to go into that with that mindset that this is a spiritual battle. And so we need to use our spiritual tools such as Scripture to say what the life within the womb really is. And if Christ were to come and were to die on the cross, the Son of God, conquer death and rise again, for not only us, but for the preborn. If you look in the Scriptures, it says that, Christ died for sinners. But when you look in the Psalms, you'll see that, the psalmist is saying that we were sinners from the moment of conception. Not that there was something sinful in that moment of conception, but that we were in conception, we were born and we were conceived with a sin nature. So if Christ died for sinners and we were a sinner from that moment of conception, that means Christ died for the preborn. So if Christ would die for the preborn, they deserve our protection, they deserve our attention, and it's just what God wants.
Amen. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. William Lile, for your time and expertise, and God bless you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir, and you have a blessed evening.
All right, you too. Thank you.